Welcome to I'm Going In, the newest and hottest podcast sharing incredible stories of strength, resilience, and love. This podcast is about that moment when you face trauma or been knocked down and you decide, I'm going in. Whether it's to help yourself stand back up, to strengthen your faith, or to support others, this is where inspiration begins. Like and subscribe to my social channels and get ready to be uplifted as I introduce our next incredible guest on I'm Going In. Hey everybody, welcome back to I'm Going In. I'm Todd Blyleven, your host, and I'm joined today by just an incredible individual, yet another amazing, inspiring guest, Dave Sanderson. Dave is an incredible entrepreneur. He's a best-selling author, philanthropist, and he's a survivor of the miracle on Hudson, which we are going to talk about. Dave, I really am honored to have you on. When I had heard that you had interest in joining the podcast and sharing your story, the impactful trauma and everything that you've endured in your life and how you've been able to stand up and rise and then educate so many people across the globe has just been inspiring. So I can't wait for my viewership to hear your story. But we were talking before we started all this recording, and you're a Marvel buff, which is awesome. You're a sports, just a fan. So we're talking about baseball and a lot of commonalities. So thank you for joining I'm Going In.
Thank you very much, Todd, for having me today.
So I thought, I'd like to dive in, start it a little bit lighter. Can you give us an idea on what you're currently doing? I know you're doing a lot of speaking. Obviously, you're an international, probably one of the top speakers in the world, and the people that you're going out and impacting. What are you doing today in terms of the speaking, and how has that been going?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's since COVID, as we know, COVID shut speaking down pretty significantly, and we had to sort of shift our mindsets to be able to go through more of a virtual. But no, I'm very honored to be able to go around the country and around the world, not only sharing the message of what happened that day, but really more importantly, Todd, the lessons that came out of the miracle on the Hudson. There were a lot of things that happened that a lot of people don't really know. I can tell people. That's one thing we talk about Marvel movies. One thing about what Marvel does well, they give you the backstory of the heroes, and that's where the real story is. So one of the things that I do when I have the opportunity to speak is I give the backstory of what really happened, why things were going down inside the plane and after we got off the plane, which I guess people with a better perspective of what really happened, because it was really, it was a miracle, and there's a lot of different miracles that happened that day. We'll get more into that in a couple of minutes, but I also, I conduct workshops now, and the reason why is because so many people kept coming to me about the subject we were talking about is how, and the question I get asked, how did you get back on a plane after you went through a plane crash?
Yeah.
And really that question, Todd, is how did you bounce back with resiliency to get to where you are? That's the question. What did you do differently?
Yep.
So that's why I started my own workshop. I'm doing a workshop now, and now I'm coaching people about the different the mindset you really have to have. As you mentioned, just published my third book, The Limitless Life. Very honored to do that. We did that in New York City after we brought all the first responding units, military, healthcare, and Red Cross people who contributed to that outcome of the miracle on Hudson together on the 15th anniversary last week, which is very powerful. It was very emotional for me. I had to really hold it tight, because I was starting to lose it a couple of times. Because when you see all these heroes together for the first time, right, in the approximate place where this whole thing happened. So I'm very blessed to be able to do that. And my goal is, what my mentor sort of helped me understand is my mission. And so we'll get to talk about that, but that's what I'm doing now. And, I have my own little company. I have like 3 associates and me. So we have about 4 people on our team right now. So it's a growing little company and just here to impact people's lives.
Dave, you're touching on some really amazing stuff here. I just was mentioning, I had lunch with a friend. He's a firefighter in Little Elm, Texas, and he's, working their mental health division. And as you probably know, in the first responder community, mental health is, it's in dire need. We need to be able to do more. We need better services. Those men and women that are out on that front line, whether it's a nurse or animal control, fire, police, military. These people need help. They need to know that they're not alone and that it's not a strength, not a sign of weakness to ask for help, right? And being vulnerable is actually really cool. And one of the things that came up in this conversation was that you just touched on was the being okay with sharing that vulnerability. Too many people, as we go to conferences, whether it's sharing stories of trauma and more about the pictures and the images, opposed to this is what I dealt with personally. This is what I felt. This is what I saw. That opens up the heart, which I'm excited to hear your story about. And then you're talking about the aftermath, the resilience. How do I stand back up for myself and live? And that's what I dealt with in my experience. But Jeremy was talking about how you can read through some of that when you've been on that front line and you've been knocked down and someone's talking to you and they're not sharing that vulnerability. You can read through it, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just exciting to hear you promote that vulnerability and standing there and you wanted to just let that raw emotion out on that week at the 15-year anniversary of this. So I appreciate your vulnerability and your strength because it's very courageous to be able to tell this story and share that with others. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Todd, because you can tell I have a passion for my first responder and military friends, and that's one of the reasons 3 years ago I went back into the Hudson River to raise money for our military, and I swam with the Navy SEALs from New Jersey to New York, which I had swam in 40 years. And the first time I went back in the pool, Todd, the coach looked at me and one of the SEALs, who was my sponsor, looked at me. I did 25 meters. And I could barely breathe, right? But in 100 days, I was able to swim 3.1 miles with the elite. And it wasn't about that. It was about a couple of different things. Number one is I wanted to raise money for just exactly what you just said, because the suicide rate is so high with especially military people coming transitioning out. It's appalling to me. It's appalling. So I really want to put a focus on those folks who were going through a traumatic experience or a challenging time. But second, and I talk about now in my I want to show my kids, but other people, how to face your fears. I went back into the Hudson River, which I almost lost my life in the Hudson River. And I wanted to show people how you can get back and how to face your fears. So that's, and I've done this is the third year I've done it. This year I did it out in San Diego at Coronado Bay with all special operation people, Green Berets, Marine Raiders, Army Rangers, and Navy SEALs, and to raise money for those folks transitioning out. And that's also one of the reasons what I'm doing with another gentleman. We're doing an event just on this topic right here, first responders, military, women who've been through traumatic experiences. And we're going to do an event on in Modesto, California in April. And I'm not only speaking, but we're going to do a fire walk and show people how they can face their fears right now. And we'll break through and get them back on stage, get them back within minutes. First time I've done a fire walk like this. I've done it many times in other venues. So we're going to do that. I think it's April 2nd in Modesto, California. So you're hitting on a subject that's very close to my heart.
That's so awesome, man. You're giving me goosebumps just thinking about the impact of it. Because I know that feeling when you're just down and lost and all of a sudden something grabs you, inspires you. There's a hand that comes down and lifts you up, whether it's your faith or it's an individual telling their story. And the immediate strength that overcomes you, and you almost feel like, okay, I'm pinning my shoulders back. I'm watching Dave do it. I'm watching so-and-so do it. Now I'm going to do this for myself. And that leap of faith, it's amazing. So, hey, so let's get into this. Obviously it's such an impactful story. Can you take us from the beginning and just tell your story of this? And really excited.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version because it can be said. First point that I always make and tell people is I wasn't supposed to be on that plane. I was scheduled on the 5:00 flight, and we were working in a distribution center in Brooklyn, New York. That I did my job in sales, and I was leading a team working with a potential client. And in a distribution center, I tell people, if you've never been or worked in a distribution center, which many people haven't, they open up early in the morning because that's when all the food and everything they're doing starts getting shipped to the places, right? So we wanted to see how all this operation was going. So that's why we showed up early. We showed up at 5:00. So we got done about 10 because the trucks end about 9:00 because they're already out making routes. So we were done about 10 o'clock. I'm like, I can go home. Let's go home early. called the travel agent, worked with her. She put me on flight 1549. So I wasn't supposed to be on the plane. But nothing extraordinary. It was 11 degrees of snowing that day. But that's New York City in the winter. All right, no big deal. If you've ever been out of LaGuardia, which I fly a lot, and flew out, I flew out of LaGuardia last week. It's always delayed, right? So no big deal, right? But about 60 seconds after we took off is when I heard an explosion, which I never heard on a plane before. And then you're in New York City, hear an explosion on a plane. But it didn't start on me too much because, one of the things I realized is I saw fire coming out from the left wing. I thought the engine blew. Okay, no big deal. We're going back to the airport. But I tell people, that's where the miracle really starts. That's what I tell people. It was one of the most fascinating things about that moment is no one knew on the plane, except for the captain and first officer. No one knew what happened on the left side of the plane where I was sitting, also up on the right side at the same exact second. And I tell people, I truly believe, and this is my belief, anybody can believe what they want to. If anybody would have heard bang, bang, now you have a different thought. But we heard bang. It's okay, we lost an engine, right? And you start banking, you're going back to the airport. Until all of a sudden you're seeing Manhattan up close and personal. It's like you're right there. I mean, Manhattan's right outside the window. Like, whoa, never seen that, right? And you look out, you see this bridge coming up very quickly. I'm like, I've never seen that. And all of a sudden you hear the magic words as your captain brace for impact. And now you know it's serious. Something's going on because all you can see in front of you is water. You have there's no runway, there's no airport, there's no road, and you've got Manhattan where I was. You have Manhattan on my left, you got Jersey City on my right, or that area. So, and then about 60 seconds after you cross the bridge is when we crashed into the river, and it was an extremely hard hit. He estimates he hit between 110, 120 miles an hour. That's how hard a hit the plane was. So it was a very jarring hit. And when I was like, if I could survive this thing, I better have a game plan, right? Because I played athletics. Every time I had a game, we had a game plan. We went to a game, right? You have a game plan. So my game plan was aisle up out. And I said, if I survive this thing, I better be able to get out of this plane because this thing's sinking. It'll be sinking in water. So that was my mindset: aisle up out. Well, we survived the hit. Get up, look up. Now water's about halfway up my window, right? Water's rushing into the plane because the backside of the plane got busted off. So now you got water about knee deep, water about halfway up your window, and all of a sudden it's time to go. And no, I tell people the term I used that night with Katie Couric on CBS was controlled chaos. It wasn't people. I mean, it wasn't people out of their minds and screaming and yelling and pushing. It wasn't, but people were moving quick, right? I mean, it was, you got to move now. You have no time for messing around. Time to go. So, my thought was, right, aisle up out. So when it's my time to the aisle, like time to go out, then all of a sudden that's when my day changed. And I think my destiny changed at that second because what happened to me, Todd, was when I got there, I heard my mom start talking to me in the back of my head. And my mom passed away in 1997, but there's something she would tell me when I was a child. And all of a sudden I heard in the back of my head from her telling me is, if you do the right thing, God will take care of you.
Wow.
And, I grew up in a small town, as we were talking about. I grew up outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a small town. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody took care of everybody. So instead of going out, I climbed over the seats to go towards the back, see if anybody needed help. Wow. Things were moving pretty quick, right? I mean, nothing out. People were moving quick, and the water was about chest level deep because the plane. People see the plane from the front. What you got to see is the plane from the side. But the back of the plane was already submerged underwater. That's the angle you need to see. And that's why I have that angle in my book, Moments Matter. I want people to see. It's not nice, genteel. No. It's game on, as we would say. So I got in the back, got behind the last person, started making my way out. It was dark because you got to remember, it's late afternoon, winter, you got water on a dark plane, right? All these things, right? I mean, people understand, right? There's a lot of things going on, but the first light that I saw was on the right side of the plane at 10F. I'm like, okay, get out of here, right? Got to the door. I'm getting out just like everybody else. I look out. That wing you see everybody standing on, it's already filled up. That boat that everybody's sitting in, it's already filled up. There's no room. And that's why I was inside the plane waist deep in 36-degree water, holding on to the lifeboat for about 7 minutes because there's no room for me.
Oh my gosh.
That's why I never got on the wing. And what happened was about 6, 7 minutes later, I felt the plane shift. And at that point, I didn't know what happened. Later, I found out because one of the first responders told me what happened. What happened is one of the boats as part of the rescue was a tugboat. And if you've never been on a tugboat, they're big, heavy boats that pull boats, right? They pull boats, hit the front of the plane, and it shook the plane. And at that moment, that's when I felt the water going up my back. And the first thought that I said, man, this is like Titanic, man. It's going down. You got to get out of here. And I tell people, I'm grateful for my parents that made me learn how to swim when I was a kid. Because if I hadn't learned how to swim, I may never get off that plane. Because I had to jump in 36-degree water in the Hudson River, in deep water, right, nasty water, to get out of the plane. So I tell people it's the longest 15-yard swim of my life because I was fully clothed, right. I was in 36-degree water, and there's jet fuel in the water, and that's why I wear glasses today because I got jet fuel in my eyes from swimming. But I got there. I got to the end of the wing, and now I'm holding on the wing, bobbing in the water, and you climb. You have can't. And then I heard my mom again because the word my mom hated most of life was the word can't. So I got one arm up and the other arm up, and two guys, drug me. And I'm not a small guy. Drug me on this ferry and threw me over the side, and that's how I got out. And now I'm on the ferry. I don't know where I'm at, and I tell people say, most people say you should have been dead by now. You've been in 36-degree water for over 10 minutes. Yeah, and but you talk to first responders or military, and I'll tell you, it's adrenaline, right? It's adrenaline. Mm-hmm. So you can go all day long on adrenaline, but when that adrenaline goes, it's hard to explain how cold. Because not only was it 36-degree water, but it's 11-degree air temperature hitting at the same time. I could barely breathe. So there are a few moments that I thought I was a goner. That was the first moment I thought that I may not make this thing because I can't breathe. Fortunately, I got enough breathing that get me to New Jersey, and that's when all my fun started, when I got to the shores of New Jersey.
Dave, wow, man. I mean, anybody that's been on a plane, right? You always think about, God, you're always praying, number one, please just get me to where I need to go safely, number one, right? And then to be in that moment where you hear that pilot say, embrace for impact, that time of that moment right there until touchdown, or until you land, what was going through your mind at that moment?
Yeah, I did three things. I prayed, right? Mm-hmm. I want to make sure I was good, right? I want to check in, because when you think you're going to die, and I tell people this, I said, I was the first time in my life I ever thought I may die. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that me and the big guy were in line. I didn't want anything between us right now, right? I want to go up. I didn't want to go down. Yeah. And the second thing I did is I got my wallet out of my briefcase and shoved it in my pants so somebody could at least identify me.
Wow.
And then when I put my head down, that was about 60 seconds to go. When I put my head down, I saw the movie of my life pass before my eyes. And I think and I tell people, I don't know for sure, but I think that's what happens when you're at that moment when you think you're going to go, is you can all of a sudden see what's happening in your life, right? Obviously you understand what your life's all about. And that's the moment I started realizing what my life was about, and I wasn't there for my family enough. I was traveling because I was doing dad's stuff.
Yeah.
Dads make money so they can take care of their families. I was doing dad stuff.
Yeah.
And I missed a lot of things with my kids. That's my first time I sort of realized, you know what? If I get out of this thing, I got to sort of change some things. Then you put your head down, right? So the last minute is when I saw that movie. It was a very slow moving minute, and it's like your life all slows down, and you see things from Little League baseball to tell people. I saw things when I was a kid, Little League baseball, playing football in high school, certain moments, defining moments, meeting my wife. All these defining moments were like flashing in my head. It was like very clear. Mm-hmm. It was very clear. So I think your memory starts kicking in, right? It's like, all right, that stuff's still there. And I think that's part of this that helped me tremendously, because now I really understand, I was on drive. I mean, it was about me, because I had to, my model of the world at that point in time was like my dad's was. He grew up in the 30s, in the Depression. His model of the world was dads go out and work, mom stays home.
That's right. Yeah.
That was the model. Not the right model, the wrong model. It was the model that I grew up with. So that was the model that we had.
Yeah.
And my dad was never home for me because he was working all the time. So, yeah,
That's
so that's there's a lot of things. My new book, I actually share some of these lessons, but yeah, that's that last moment. I heard some people making phone calls, some people on texting people, right? I mean, everybody's doing their own thing, right? I think because everybody at that point thought, time to check in. Time to check in.
relatable stories. I touch on this a lot, just sharing stories of relation, especially with those that we've all suffered through trauma in our lives, right? And there's
Okay,
always been there's lead up to no matter what kind of trauma that is. And unfortunately, those of us that have been in horrific incidences where it's either caused mass casualty or caused mass damage, and we've been directly involved in that moment. I know when I first heard the shooting coming and we decided, all right, let's get up and run. And that moment from that 50-40 yards of running was very slow to me. And all I kept praying was, please let my boot come down, and trying to be as big as I could for God, in case God forbid a bullet were to come in our way, that it hit me and not my wife. And when you get to that moment, and now all of a sudden, all those prayers and everything else that you're praying for, and you get to that safety net, right? Where you've touched down now it's like, okay, I'm here. What do I do? And like me, I was given a choice, I believe, in that moment when I helped lay a woman down that lost her life, to say yes or no. And I chose yes. I chose to go back in. And you, in that very moment, had the opportunity, like so many, and we don't hold anybody accountable for what they do in that moment of chaos, because you never know what you're going to do. But you
right.
chose to turn around and see if people behind you were okay, which is, I think, just an amazing testament to your strength and courage in a crazy situation like that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I tell people, I could have gone out and I would have been fine, and but
Mhm.
I don't judge anybody. I don't
Right.
judge. You don't know what you're going to do in that moment. You
That's right.
don't know what you're going to do in that moment, right?
Right.
But my value set, and fortunately for me, my mom and dad still have some serious values. Plus, one of the things I had the benefit of is I was head of security at that time for Tony Robbins, and
Wow.
Tony, I was around head of security for him for 10 years, so I got to be around how to really manage your state of mind, how to do it, right? When all hell's hitting the fan, excuse my language, when all stuff's hitting the fan, how do you manage your mindset? So I had a lot of training in that. So for me, I was able to sort of narrow down and make decisions, right? Because it really comes down to two things. Are you resourceful, and how can you make a decision? Because most of the times you get into situations like that, you go the other side of resourcefulness, right? Because you don't think you have any resources, or you can't make a decision because it could be the wrong decision. But then, but you got to take action. You got to do something like you did. You have to do something. It may cost you your life, but at least you go out trying to help somebody else. So I think my mother was proud of me. I mean, she's in heaven, and one day we'll have that conversation. She was watching it all, right? I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, you know, the choice wasn't that difficult for me. People ask, no, when I heard that in my head, it's like, no, I mean, there's people in the back. I don't know you don't know what's going on, but I'm alive. I don't know if they're alive,
Yeah.
right?
Well, and that's the other part that, you know, you talk about the adrenaline piece, right? And you're
Yep,
just on pure instinct in that moment. And everything that I believe that you were raised with provides the coping skills to allow you to process and put you in a place to where, okay, I can handle this or I can't. And there you are, you're in 36-degree water for 7 minutes or so, and then the fight for life to just continue to keep paddling and getting out of there to live, um, is inspirational in itself. But when you get back and now you're on the shore, right, and everybody's
yep.
coming through, and at what point was there? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, when you're there and there's all kinds of people trying to ask if you're okay, and obviously you're going through that trauma right off the bat. At what point, if you can walk us through that time when all of a sudden you realized, okay, hold on, I'm not okay. I need a little bit more. I'm going through some things. Did you have peer support? Who was there for you? What was your faith like at that moment? When did you kind of be able to stand back up, and what was that process for you?
Oh, thank you. So what happened when I got to the triage center in New Jersey? Um, Obviously, I wasn't in good physical shape because they had to carry me, and they stripped my clothes off. Right, I'm gonna sit on the floor basically naked with two other people. Right, I mean, you don't even know what's going on now. Right,
Wow.
see, that moment, what happened was there was a gentleman who came up to me. He had a card in his hand. He asked me for my name and date of birth, and he writes it down on his card and he wraps it around my right ankle. Now, I don't know about you, and I tell people I grew up in the 70s. There was a TV show called MASH. When they take your toe,
Yeah.
you're done. And that's
Yeah.
exactly what I thought. I
Oh my
thought I was dead. I
gosh.
said, okay, I didn't make it. I said, this is the movie Ghost. I'm just watching this whole thing play out, right? I really thought I was at that point in time. I said, I'm not here. I'm just watching, hovering over this, right? Until my EMT came and took my blood pressure and said, thank God I got blood pressure. It was 90 over 120. And she goes, you got to go stat. And once again, you hear stat, something's going to happen. I was in pretty tough shape. So that's when they started moving me, right? I mean, they got me on a gurney, got me to the ambulance, got me to the hospital, got me on the bed, and all of a sudden everybody starts working on you, right? And what happened is it took them 5 hours basically to warm my body up. Basically, what I found out later from the doctors, and everything south of my heart was frozen. My abdomen or my stomach, my kidneys, everything was frozen. I couldn't move anything. So until those organs started working again, I was basically in that critical time, right? And it was 5 hours of that. But fortunately for me, that I had people around me taking care of me, right? But on the mental side, what was really interesting about that question is, I was when I got back to Charlotte, I was on go, 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 right? Because this has just happened to me. Oh, by the way, I still got to work.
Yep.
I
Yep.
mean, and very candid, my manager at that point really didn't give a rat's tuchus, right? It's like get back to work, which actually turned out to be the right thing for me to do. I didn't have to do it, but well, I spoke that next weekend, and this is where it started turning for me, Todd, because I'd never spoken before. I didn't even know what I was going to say.
Mm.
I spoke for men's breakfast at our church, and
Wow.
all I've seen is men's breakfast is 50 old guys eating pancakes. You know,
Yep.
to me that's a walk in the park, right?
Yep.
Eh. They invite half of Charlotte, and 500-600 people show up and run out of pancakes. Now I tell people I have hungry, angry Methodist. I don't know what I'm going to do now, right? And
Right.
I said whatever I said, but what happened? There's a lady that came up to me and told me she didn't believe in God, she didn't believe in miracles, but I was physical evidence that there was a God. He does miracles, and she thanked me, held my arm, and these
Mm.
two gentlemen were watching start bawling. I mean,
Wow.
physically crying. These two gentlemen, and my minister was witnessing the whole thing. My minister witnessed this whole thing. I looked at him like, well, what's going on? And that's when I realized what happened to me. It impacted somebody
Yeah.
who now believes there's a God who does miracles because I'm physical evidence. And
Right.
that's what set me on my pathway. That was the moment. And I tell people that's that defining moment. That was a defining moment for me, right? That set me on the pathway. But I still didn't know what I was going to do. But I never went through the PTSD. And what happened to me, Todd, was this. If you saw the movie Sully, there's a lot of people from that plane that did. Okay, they had either had going through a depressed state or went that even further. We know that,
Right.
but I didn't. So I got a phone call from this magazine, and you may have heard of it, you may not have heard of it. It's called AARP
Yeah.
for old people, right? And the guy said, "I want to interview you for this article for AARP." I said, "What can I tell old people, right? I mean, they've been longer than I have." He said, "But no, we want to talk to you because there are two universities doing a study on you on how did you grow out of this. Well, other people went a whole different direction. What did you do differently?"
Yeah.
So I did this article interview, and all of a sudden I get a phone call to do a TED talk. And my TED talk's called about bouncing back, PTGS, post-traumatic growth syndrome. And then I shared the strategies, basically what I did differently in a TED talk, which went viral. And that's what
Amazing.
sort of set me off in another direction, because now I'm helping people. Because
Yep.
what you said a moment ago is exactly correct. Everybody in their lives going to have a personal plane crash moment. Something's going to happen. You had your moment. Some people maybe just be a heart attack or
Yep.
maybe a car crash, right? They move, they lose, but somebody's gonna have something, because you know what, in life, as you know this, and I know this, no one gets through life unscathed.
That's right.
Something's going. Even I tell people, even the Queen of England had bad days, right?
That's right.
Even Jesus had bad days,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
He had a real
Yeah.
bad day, right? He
Yeah.
had a real bad day. So yeah, so everybody's got. So there's got to be strategies on how to, because some people have come back from it. What are those strategies? And that's what I help people. That's why I have such affinity in what I do for the military. As we talked about, swimming with the SEALs and first special operators, doing what I do for the first responding units, because they go through this all the time,
Yep.
right? They live it. So I help them with the strategies on how they can bounce back or turn it around, or give them a reference point to how to do that. So
That's right. Yeah. I mean, so powerful. I mean, thank you, number one, for sharing your story. I know it's not easy to talk about and then to relive, even as many times as what you probably have. But there's a new mission now, which I think people have asked me before, like, are you going to be okay with telling your story? Yes, I'm okay. I'm not going to give you all the details. I'm not going to go into the gore of it by any means. I'm going to give you, like you said, I'm going to give you the Cliff Note versions. I always say,
yep,
I'm going to give you the PG-13 version of it,
yep,
but I'm going to try to dial it down to PG if I can. But it's now, like you, I'm hearing so many relatable experiences in my own kind of just starting out in telling my story, where it's become more than just what happened in that moment that gets people to, you're taking the heart out, right? You've
right,
got now the attention. It's the attention grabber. This is what I went through, but then it's the aftermath. This is how I was able to stand back up for myself. This is the moment I decided I'm going in for myself. I'm going in to help others, which has been your
right,
mission now in life, and now is mine. And it's so awesome to hear you talk about things, because it's just affirmation that what I know I'm feeling and how I want to be able to help first responders, just anyone dealing with trauma. Because, like you said, trauma is trauma, right? No matter what it is, we've all gone through our own, like you said, plane crashes, and in those
yep,
moments, you had that divine moment a couple different times to help you stay alive. And I feel
right,
like in that moment I did as well. When I got back, I had a dream that an angel was with me as I was running through the field and picking up people to carry them out. And I wouldn't have been able to do that because the red tracers and the bullets that were flying around me, they were bouncing off the angel's wings as I was running out to Giles Street. It was an impactful dream that changed my life and my faith forever. And I'm hearing the same type of the same relatable experiences that you've had. And it's not all about the divine intervention, but it's what we've done with that gift, right?
right.
The
It's just how you
vulnerability
respond with
part
it.
that you possess and you probably shared in that moment, you're not afraid to tell it. And you're telling it in a way that's courageous and relatable. And people are gravitating towards it because they want to know how can I be like Dave Sanderson? How can I survive a horrific ordeal in my own mind and what I'm experiencing and be like him or be like her? So,
Yep.
I, man, that's awesome. I love the just
Yeah.
testament of it. It's so cool.
Well, thank you. I mean, one of the, I tell people, people ask me what's one of the more difficult moments. I tell people what was one of the most difficult moments for me was, and this happens whenever there is a transportation incident. I usually get a phone call from somebody to do an
Mm,
interview, right? They usually want the passenger's perspective, and then like the captain will do his stuff, right? So I don't know if you remember that plane crash in Buffalo. It killed everybody.
yeah,
It was about 6 weeks after the miracle on the Hudson,
yeah.
and everybody died. And I had a client on that plane actually from Charlotte. I
Oh,
had a client,
wow.
and so I got a call to do an interview, and it was from a TV station in Montreal.
Mm,
And one of the first questions he asked me is what said, "Sir, why do you think they died and you didn't?" And I was like sitting there going, this is 6 weeks after my plane crash. And I'm going, it just wasn't my time.
yeah,
I mean, I haven't finished running my race. They finished running the race, right? I said, I don't know what the answer is, but there was a different, whatever happened that day. That's why it gets called a miracle, because there's so many miracles happening. And my belief is God's hands were all over that plane.
yeah.
And that's the first interview that I did for a magazine, and it was for it was one of Reader's Digest offshoot magazines called Mission Focused Purpose. Um, and the article was God's hands were all over the plane, and I
Mm.
share with them how God's hands were on the plane, in my perspective.
Right.
I've had people shoot back at me, Todd. Right? Nah, that can't happen. Right? It just technically it was. Yeah, you got to have competence, right? You got to have competence. Their only competence always goes so far, right?
Hmm.
Something else
Yeah.
has to happen. So I think God was probably in your on your side that day. Like you said, He had angels guarding you. I think that God's hands were lifting that plane up, holding it up
That's
so
right.
everybody gets off, and the plane goes to the bottom of the river, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
Yeah, and it is hard. I know, I was raised to believe in God. I was raised to say my prayers at night, and especially before we eat. Yeah, I grew up in I call it a baseball church. Church most of the time was in dugouts, as my dad was traveling and Sunday Bible school and whatnot. But um, I think there's a difference when you're completely bonded in a moment of triumph and you're so vulnerable and you're just accepting. And what you do after that in your walk, as you accept it even more, it becomes a tighter bond. And then it's completely welded to where you feel like, hey, you know what, man? I just love life and I'm going to do what I can to help others. I'm going to share my story, or I'm just going to live life to its fullest. Like you mentioned earlier, going down, you're thinking about the times maybe you've missed, and we all don't have that luxury, right? Like some of us have to work 3 jobs or 16 hours a day, and we're missing out on that stuff.
yep,
So when you get that moment where you can make it count, right?
yep,
Um, but Yeah, incredible. When people are when you're telling your story and you're doing your talks now, especially, are people more interested in the story of it, or are they more interested? I know you were alluding to it a little bit, more interested in the aftermath. And
yep.
can you give us a sense of what that's really helped you with where you're at today and what your missions are in the next coming years?
Yeah, thank you. For the first few years, it's definitely about the story. People wanting to hear the story, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot about that. But really, right now, what people are most interested in is what did you learn? How did you do this? How did you bounce back? And what did you learn from it? So I spent a lot of my time. I basically use a story to frame how I bounced back and parts of the story that I use and how I did that and how I still do it and the lessons that I learned from it. Because the way it comes the way I did my books even. So to even give you an example, my first book was called Moments Matter. Okay. And that was about basically the moments of that day. And the moments that day, I had moments in my when I was growing up that basically gave me the certainty and the reference points to be able to handle what happened that day. Like I tell a story that when I was in Boy Scouts, I was going for Order of the Arrow Award, and one of the things we had to do is we had to get across the river to get to the next activity. And yeah, we could have walked down the bank across the bridge, but we swam. We were 13, 12, 13 years old. We swam,
Mm,
right? I said maybe that's a moment in my when I was 12 or 13. It gave me the certainty to be able to jump in the water, swim.
right.
So that book was really about how the moments in your life are there for a reason and a purpose, and they will serve you. Right. The second book is called From Turmoil to Triumph because I want people to understand, this is a journey, right? But the journey started for me in 1984 when I had a mentor that came into my life is teaching me these lessons, right? He took me. He was 77 years old when he took me on in 1984. He
Wow.
was an old guy, right? And he already made it. He owned 80 movie theaters and restaurants in the Carolinas, right? He made it, and the bottom line was he wanted to leave his legacy with somebody, and he left it with me. That's what
Wow.
this book's about, and those lessons that I learned from him and like Tony Robbins, I was able to use those to be able to have the mindset to be able to execute. The third book, The Limitless Life, shows you how you can have a limitless life after a traumatic life experience and the lessons and strategies I did to be able to do that. So I'm detailing that out in this book. I give 15 lessons of what happened and how I learned and how I was affected and how I grew from that and how you too can bounce back.
Yeah.
And I tell people at the end of the book, I said, you can take one or a combination, but any one of these will make this change. Because one thing I talk about in my TED Talk is one of the biggest learnings. It's the meaning you attach to something produces the emotion you have, and emotion's your life. Whatever emotion you're in is how you're living. So that meaning, and some people attach a very negative meaning to that plane crash. I know one personally, right? And they went this way. The meaning I attached was this was a blessing for me because it opened up a whole new avenue for my life. Same situation, totally different directions in life. So I teach people about how to reframe meanings, right? How to do that. So some of the things that we
That
do.
that's I mean, and I know we're going to wrap up here pretty quick, pretty soon, but I want to touch on one last thing here with you, if you don't mind,
Sure.
because you brought up just the history of people that have impacted you along your life's journey, right? And
Yep.
the what you've been able to absorb, you listened, you applied, and then later on in your life, as you've, let's say, post trauma, part of like this experience, this
Mm-hmm.
horrific experience, you've now taken things and you're paying it forward, right? You're taking those
Right.
lessons that you've learned and you're paying it forward. And I call that courage, right? I call that the time when you see someone that's been knocked down, or you know you're going into a situation to talk, like in your case with being a professional speaker as well. And you've got these little snackable bits and pieces that you know people are going to gravitate to. And now you're just taking your knowledge and you're paying it forward with all the cool people that you've been around. Not everybody gets a chance to do that, right? Be around those types of people. But
No, I think everybody's got the opportunity. A lot of people don't take advantage of it.
thank you.
See,
Yes, that's what I want to bring in.
my blog, I just got done writing for next week. I talk about how proximity is power. You
Yeah.
got to put yourself around people. So I'll leave you with this. So you're exactly correct. Because what happened was my mentor, like I mentioned, was 77 in 1984 when he took me on. In 1997, right before he passed away, he called me to his office and he wanted to give me something. And he basically he sat down next to me, pulled these handwritten notes. He wrote 1929 out. He put them on my lap. He said, "I want to give this to you." He says, "I go, what is it?" These are the notes that I wrote. It was basically how I became successful. I'm going to leave it with you, but you have to promise me something. I said, "What?" He goes, "Do not let it die with you." He passed away in September that year, 1997.
Wow.
For many years, I didn't do anything with it until I was writing my book, Moments Matter. And this credenza right here is right next to me. I found those notes. I'm like, first, I felt ashamed. But second, it's something my dad taught me when I was a kid. And it was probably one of the best lessons I ever learned. Your word's your bond. Whatever you say, you better live up to it. And I had not lived up to the promise. So what you just said is my mission. I'm going to leave this legacy, right? I'm going to everything that I've absorbed. This is what I'm doing. This is why I do workshops, at mentor people, coach people, write books, do my magazine, Moments
Hmm.
Matter, is to fulfill that mission, that promise I made to him in 1997.
Man, Dave, you're an inspiration. I know you probably don't like to be told that, or that, you're a hero, but what you've been able to do with the cards that were dealt to you in that moment, and how you've been able to impact so many lives, and you were impacting lives before, but then the aftermath and how you've been able to take that story and inspire is really, it's truly remarkable. And
Well, thank you. Thank you
I
for sharing
commend
your
you for
story
that.
too. I knew a little bit about your story, but thank you so much for expanding on some, because I think that, like you said, and I reiterated, everybody's got that moment. Something's going to happen. You
Everybody's
just
got
don't know
that
when it's going
moment.
to happen, man. You know,
Yeah.
it can happen just like that, right?
That's yeah. And that's why you got to live life for the best you can today.
That's
Right.
right.
All right. One
That's
last
right.
question.
Sure.
Two last questions. Two questions.
Okay.
Favorite Avenger?
My favorite Avenger is Captain America. I
Yes.
love Captain America. Well, you know what? I'm an all-American boy, right?
That's right.
I love Captain America. I love most of the Avengers, but Captain America always stood out to me because about the values, right? About the
Right.
values he grew
That
up with.
values. All right.
Yep.
Second question. Last question. Favorite DC character?
That's more interesting. I love Superman. I love Superman. Um, but you know what? I always sort of dug the Green Lantern. Likewise,
Mm,
it's sort of cool, right? But Superman. Just something about Superman. Just like the dude. The dude just hangs in there and keeps doing his thing, and is pretty modest and humble. And so, I would love to see the Superman versus Captain America battle. I really would. But yeah, yeah,
There you go.
like you, I love this stuff because it shows that there are still people. And that's why those movies are so impactful. People are looking for heroes.
Yeah.
They're looking for heroes.
Yeah.
Someone who does something extraordinary to help somebody else.
That's right.
And that's what those movies are about, and that's what you did, and hopefully we contribute a little bit on my end. So, that's why
So awesome.
I love those movies, and that's why I think people love those movies.
Wow. Well, keep being a hero, brother. Keep inspiring. And thank you so much for being on I'm Going In. I really appreciate it. I look forward to a friendship. And any way that I can ever assist you and help you in your efforts, please let me know.
I may take you up on that offer when I come to Minneapolis. All right.
Hey,
All
there you
right.
go. Yeah,
I may take you
perfect.
up on that offer. All right.
All right.
Thank you very much. And if anyone needs it, my website's DaveSandersonSpeaks.com. If anybody wants any information, love to serve you. If you have, check it out. Thank you very
Um,
much.
and I know, as we've been speaking and people have seen your stuff go through on the podcast here on the video. And then for our audio listeners, we will definitely share something after this podcast is over, promoting what you're doing and how people can get in touch with you. So
Thank you. And for one thing, if they want to go out on my website, they can get a free copy of my magazine, Moments Matter. All they got to do is click on it and just put their name and address in. If they say, heard it from this podcast, right? At least we'll know where it came from. They can get my magazine for free. Moments
that's
Matter.
awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on.